Hello, and welcome to Tech Tuesday, live at 11. I'm excited today to be joined by Ronda Coryell, a Jewelers of America certified master bench jeweler and one of the world's most well-regarded experts on the use of Argentium. She is a well-respected teacher and one of my favorite people in the entire world. If you ever get a chance to spend any time with Ronda Coryell, her energy is infectious. She has this positivity about her and everything that from the very first time I met you, I can't explain it. But before we get to that, Files 10 for 10% off all Frederick Dick files for the month of May. So don't forget, Files 10 is our code this month. And we also have samples of Rhonda's tools and equipment line that she provides here at Rio Grande. We have the Rhonda's Purple Flux and Rhonda's Coryell's Masking Mud. And she may explain a little bit about that as we get into it. But once again, Tech Tuesday is all about your questions. So if you have any questions, get them into the chat. We will try to get them all answered. If we don't get them answered, we'll do it in a future episode. But before we get to those questions, Rhonda, welcome to Tech Tuesday.
I'm happy to be here.
Rhonda, you are an amazing woman. You have an amazing story, and I'd like for you to tell me, first of all, how you got into the jewelry business, because it's not a normal waking up one day and saying, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do." And
Yeah.
So tell us.
I was an art education major in college, and that's where I took jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
But I always wanted to be a teacher. And then once I graduated from college, I actually moved to Ruidoso and started doing stained glass. I ended up doing the entire Catholic Church there in Ruidoso.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I thought I got stories you haven't heard yet.
Oh, wow.
So, but I left jewelry behind.
Uh-huh.
And then I got remarried and moved to Florida. And there was an ad in the paper for a jeweler. And I went in to see him. It's for a bench jeweler.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I don't know how to fix anything. I mostly carved waxes in college.
Okay.
And he took me into a wax bench and said, make something, and walked away. I was so nervous I broke the first one. I hadn't carved a wax in 15 years. And I carved another one. He hired me as his master model maker. And I had 6 jewelers working under me.
Wow.
That I could go to. And what an education that was. It was jewelry you'd never learn in college.
Right.
You know, you're using, I'd say, well, how deep do you need it? How much metal do you need here? How thick? And all these things. Mm-hmm. And then we also started, you'd make a mold of everything you made, and we cast several times a week. So that's where I got my education. I quit that job after a couple of years and put a little shed behind the house and started doing custom work for all the jewelers. This was in Tallahassee, Florida.
Okay.
So, my son was in grade school. I was able to work from home. But basically within a year and a half, I started doing custom work for a fellow that we went in business with and opened a store like 3 blocks from my house.
Wow. That's convenient.
Yeah. And so by then, I started even hiring some of the people that I used to work with to come over after they got off work to work in the studio with me to get some production done. Anyway, I opened up a store there in Tallahassee. And then every year, I didn't do much fabricating.
Okay.
And so every year, I would close the store for a full week, and I would go study with who I thought was the best.
Right.
And that's when I found granulation.
Wow.
And so granulation refers to little balls of metal onto a base sheet, but it's done with no solder. And the finest of all time was 600 BC, the Etruscans. And so the woman, Jean Stark, that I studied with, that was life-altering. Mm-hmm. But gold was $264 an ounce.
I know. Think about that.
Oh, my God. You come study. I gave up the jewelry store after about 10 years and moved to California. And my goal was to get a job at Revere Academy.
Okay.
Teaching.
Allen Revere School.
Yes.
Yep.
And he offered me a full-time job also.
Wow.
Not in the car. I'd never had one. I'd never had a paycheck before. I was 50 years old before I ever got my first paycheck. And so anyway, but then I started going to Tucson for him.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I met the people from Rio.
Okay.
And then I won the Saul Bell Award.
Right.
And because my goal, as I left Florida, my goal was 5 years. I wanted to get a job at Revere Academy. He hired me the day I called. So new 5-year plan was to get in JCK magazine.
Okay.
Oh, you know, that to me was Jeweler's Keystone. It was the best, and I wanted to be in there. And then I won the Saul Bell, and I was in all magazines. So I realized I'd never set my goals high enough.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned once a year you go study with somebody
Yeah.
because I met you here at Rio Grande first, but where I really got to know you is I took a chasing and repose class with Fabrizio,
Yes.
and that was actually at your house.
Oh, right. Yes,
Yeah,
I
so I
remember.
was at your house for a week, and it was amazing to me because like Fabrizio is just an amazing teacher for anybody who wants to study chasing and repose. But you were equally, I don't know how to explain this. You allowed Fabrizio to have his space and have his time and everything. But then after hours, you were this wealth of knowledge about so many other things that I was interested in, including Argentium. And it was just, I would just sit there and listen to you because I still remember you had these, I think they're Bronze Age cuffs that you
Yes,
were
they're
adding high
like
carat.
5,000 years old,
Right, that you were
Bronze
adding
Age.
high carat gold to or
Yeah.
something, and those it blew my mind to think about the way you thought. I still it gives me goosebumps when I think about it, because you had all these Bronze Age cuffs I was looking at. Your house is beautiful.
But
It's
they-
full of art, and the copper work in your kitchen and everything that you did is just phenomenal. I wish we had images of all that, but anyhow, the Bronze Age cuffs just I don't know how to explain it. You, you went into this in-depth explanation on the history of what they were, and then you began to explain to me, and this is how I'm making them relevant today.
Yeah, it's like recycled jewelry.
Right, exactly. That's how you put it. It's like recycled jewelry. It's like so nonchalant. And so many people in our business, I feel like take things way too seriously, or they make it too important, and you make everything fun. That's what I
Oh, well,
love
that's
about the way you
nice.
teach.
Well, okay, even like when, and I do love teaching, but when I'm teaching, there's a point where, are you here to learn? Or if you're ready to stop, then okay, you've learned what you
Right?
wanted. But if you want to learn more, are you going to cry over it if something
Right.
happens? If not, don't touch it. But you could still learn this.
Yeah.
And that actually, once I started working with the Argentium, yeah, that really was very interesting. And it was there at Tucson in 2006. It's the first time I saw Argentium.
Okay.
And
The piece that you won the Saul Bell Award with,
that
that
was the only piece I've ever made in sterling silver, and I wanted it to be in platinum, and I realized I couldn't afford the platinum, so it became
yeah,
silver.
it's a bracelet.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
amazing.
It
I'm sure
belongs to
we
the
have it.
museum
Which
now
museum?
here in
The
Albuquerque. It was
Albuquerque Museum,
donated to
really?
the.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah, that bracelet, I'm sure we're going to be able to put it up on the web somewhere so people can see it. But that bracelet was one of the pieces that,
It put me on the map.
well,
It
and the
really
thing
did.
was, is it was so different from what anybody else was doing at that time. And your craftsmanship was way beyond what most people were doing.
Well, I'd already had my jewelry store
Yeah.
for like 10 years. Actually, when I opened, I went to learn granulation finally.
Mm-hmm.
I'd seen Jean teaching it, but she quit teaching for a number of years to write that book on chains,
Okay.
the loop and loop chains. So I was really ready for her by the time I was able to study with her. I had the skills I needed to get what I
Right.
needed. And, I used to have to teach in fine silver
Mm-hmm.
before you could work in gold.
Right.
Doesn't work like gold at all.
Right.
It's just harder.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can learn the torch control with fine silver, then okay, you go on to gold. But then gold skyrocketed, and I had to even quit teaching in it. First you got an ounce, and you got a half ounce. Now I can't teach you anymore.
Right.
So, and then that was about the same time that I found Argentium. And then the fact that Argentium works so much like gold, it just, yeah, that basically
So when you say Argentium works like gold, what exactly do you
everything
mean?
I need with my world was fusing. And so you're not using solder, you're
Right.
taking the metal with a certain number of degrees to molten. And so when I tried it with Argentium, well, Gail Philippi had come to me and she said, "Do you want to lecture again next year?" I just saw it.
Right.
Cindy Ide was demoing. I thought, if she can do that, I can granulate with it.
Right.
So Gail said, "You want to?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll I'll lecture about fusing, fabricating, and granulating with Argentium Silver." Well, that sounds great. And that was February. By September, I thought I must order some of that metal. I hadn't touched it yet.
Wow.
It was so beyond my expectations. It has continued to wow me ever since because all of these limitations that I used to have with the gold no longer exist. And the fact that you can add gold to it, even on heavy
Right.
castings,
So
is
so
quite remarkable.
so you can fuse gold to Argentium. Right.
Well,
For
and this is where, yeah, I taught in Europe for 20 years in a row, and most
hmm
everyone I was teaching are master goldsmiths.
Right.
They're not the hobbyists that maybe we might have here, but serious jewelers that want a new technique. And when gold went skyrocketing, they had to find a solution. They're goldsmiths. What are you going to
Yeah.
make?
So tell us a little bit about that. You've taught in Europe for over 20 years. Actually, you have traveled all over the world. This is one of the things that blows my mind. And you're an amazing cook.
Oh,
So,
well, thank you.
but we're not going to get into that.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners and our viewers about your travels around the world, what you've done, where you've been. Give us a little
Okay.
insight into that.
Argentium, where I first started teaching anticlastic metalsmithing
Hmm.
up in Switzerland in the Alps. And then he had brought some students to California. I was teaching casting, and they didn't speak a word of English, and it was fine.
Right.
So he then invited me to come teach there.
And
Oh
who is
my God.
he?
It's Felix Stussy. And
Okay.
it was up in the Alps in this village that has no cars. It has two horse-drawn carriage things.
Really?
They put sleighs on it in the winter. So truly clickety clickety in
Oh,
the
that
Alps.
is
It was
cool.
incredible. There was like 3 or 4 glaciers, 7 waterfalls, and so quiet at night it was almost creepy. But that was an amazing experience because they came from all over Europe to study there. And he's the first one that let me start teaching in Argentium
Okay.
because I did some demos to him.
Right.
Watch
So,
this, Felix. Watch this. And so he had me come back and teach. And then they were from all over. Fabrizio is the one that then introduced me, all over Europe. I've
okay. Was
taught.
he one of your students in one of those classes?
No, no. It's when I was at Revere, Felix Stussy came, and
Okay.
then he invited me to come to Switzerland.
Right.
And when I did, he had a brochure about Fabrizio. I thought, ooh, I want to go there. So I took 4 other students with me, and we went to Italy.
Okay.
It was his first class he'd ever taught in English.
Really?
Yeah, he was 38, and he goes, "Oh, I dreamed to someday come to America." I said, "I'll hook you up." My studio would have 15 students. First time to America, he comes to San Francisco. Anyway, it's like, welcome to America. So anyway, he's introduced me all over Europe.
Right.
I've taught in Sweden, Denmark a few times, the Netherlands a few times, Portugal, Spain, Italy, of course, Luxembourg. Where else? Oh, all over the UK,
Right.
Ireland. I've taught in Thailand, both at the University of Bangkok. Anyway, and in Chiang Mai, and lectured there. And this is the thing that has gotten me all of this is because when I was doing the things I'm doing with Argentium, nobody was doing them. And it's like a lot of it is, I don't have anyone to ask the questions to.
Right.
And Peter's never been where I'm going. He would never have tried it. He says, "I'm a silversmith. I treat it as much like sterling as I can."
Yeah.
And that's where I'm not and I don't. Because yes, it does seem to work like gold as far as the fusing abilities and the fact that you can combine the gold with it in a way that can put your work in a whole other category. I have a lot of very successful students.
Yeah, I was amazed when I took your class on fusing and everything, and I still have those pieces that I
Oh,
made.
cool.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because most of the stuff I make I sell, even stuff that was quote unquote class projects,
Oh, right.
and you know how it is.
Oh,
You,
absolutely. Well,
being
yeah.
being an artist, it's like you were talking about it earlier to somebody I was listening, and you were talking about how it's feast and famine,
Oh,
and people that aren't in this business, they don't understand, one day you may sell like crazy and have a pocket full of money, and then you hit this
absolutely.
6-month dry spell.
And that's the reality of making it as an artist.
Right.
Because that's what I said. Till I went to Revere, I'd never had a paycheck.
Well, that's kind of how I was until I came to Rio
Well, yeah,
Grande.
that's what I'm like. Yeah. And so it is just, yeah, Argentium is really what has gotten me traveling around the world
Right.
because there's so many questions.
And you're one of the first people. Tell us, how long have you been working with Argentium? How many years?
2006, when I
Right.
already told them I'd lecture about it, and
Right.
then I tried it.
And it's been just consistent ever
Well,
since then.
my mentor told me the only way to become a master is to teach because you
Right.
can never come up with all the questions.
I agree.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because students, and I've never seen this before. And when I first started teaching with it, I would say, somebody's going to show me something today I've never seen. Because it's different. It is different than sterling. It's a whole other metal. And that was the thing to do is, where can I push it? Where are
Right.
the limitations? And I kept finding those limitations didn't exist with Argentium.
Yeah. Not like they did with Sterling.
Well, I don't know. I've never really worked in it.
Yeah.
I
I've
would
done
go to a
both.
workshop and I would work in sterling, but I have no experience in sterling.
Yeah.
So when somebody would ask me, how does this compare? I can't normally answer that because I don't know what sterling would do. I only know what Argentium will do.
Right. And that's important for people to understand because they're similar metals, but they're not the same. And like
Yeah.
one of the biggest examples I give people is you have to let Argentium cool when you heat it.
And that's
And
it.
and sterling isn't that way. You can heat it red hot, and then
It
it's
it
still
doesn't
hot,
it
and it's
didn't
not going to
warp.
slump or anything, very rarely.
Okay.
And
See again,
you
I
can still pick it up with a pair of tweezers or
right.
something, and chill it and then pickle it. Whereas Argentium, you have to let it cool.
Well, I got to the point that if you drop water on it and goes, it's fine to quench it.
Okay.
If that water boils off,
Let it cool.
don't do it.
Yeah.
But it holds the heat so much longer than
Right.
sterling does. And that's where it's surprising how long it holds the heat.
And that's why it's good for the granulation, because the heat, my understanding is the heat is spread across it more evenly,
Yeah.
which allows the gold and the silver, or the Argentium
Yeah.
rather, to join together on a molecular level. And you don't get that with sterling, not to mention the fact that in sterling you have so much copper, you get that oxide layer that
Yeah.
prevents the fusing from occurring. That's because
Yes, it's too dirty of a metal for that.
right. And I get that question sometimes in from people. They want to know, well, how do I do granulation with sterling? It's possible.
Any that
You're
I've seen done is generally done with solder that's
exactly.
like powder.
Yeah. But it's not really true granulation
No,
because you're using a third component.
right.
So just to explain to us a little bit what exactly granulation is, if you don't mind.
Okay. So, well, like for example, it goes back with the gold granulation. Generally, it's a 22 karat formula. You can granulate with 18 karat, but even that is not the same. It's almost like a colloidal soldering
Okay.
because you're adding cupric carbonate, which will make it flow. All right. Whereas the Argentium will fuse in a way that you don't need solder, you
Right.
don't need, but you have the limitations of the base sheet can be no thicker than the ball. So the
No.
larger
Okay.
ones, blah blah blah. So when I found Argentium, the fact that this ring, it's a heavy casting, and I'm able to put gold granulation on it. These are like 0.9
Right.
millimeter
22
granules.
karat gold granules.
22 karat gold. Now, you can fuse 18 karat, but it tends to bleed out a little bit. Around whatever you fuse down, it pulls the alloys out into the metal.
Right. So, real quick, Rhonda, we're
Yeah.
getting a bunch of questions starting to come
Okay.
in. So, Tech Tuesday is about answering questions.
Good.
So, I want to circle back to a question that we had come in last week, or a couple of them, real quick. So, from YouTube, Ken and Cornelia ask lapidary stabilizing stones question. What is a stabilizing resin that won't yellow over time? I've been trying to answer this for years and finally realized that if anyone knows, it will be you. Do you know anything about stabilizing stones?
I wonder if it would be Opticon, or does that yellow?
Opticon is good. My experience has been I don't stabilize stones,
Well,
but the
I've
people
me either.
that I do know that stabilize stones, they actually don't use epoxy. They use a polymer resin.
Ah,
And as far as the epoxy 330, all glues are going to yellow over time. They're all going to discolor and yellow over time.
yeah.
It's just the nature of it. The yellowing is an indication that it's decomposing.
Oh,
It's the process of decomposition you're witnessing. It's just like paint changing color or anything else. So as far as that goes, I hope that answers your question, Ken and Cornelia. And then from YouTube, B. Cav Clark. When setting 4 and 5 millimeter faceted stones in relatively heavy bezels, I struggle with getting a good clean inside edge on the bezel. I use a hammer. I use a hammer handpiece. I use a fine burnisher with modest effectiveness, and I'm pretty inept with a graver. Any tips or tutorials you can offer? Thanks. I wonder how heavy a bezel. Let's see. So I use my GRS or Lindsay graver with a
you need a good sharp graver to do it and be,
yeah.
depending on the stone. Opal, be careful.
And a lot of times what people don't realize is on heavy bezels, it's an optical illusion. So you're not necessarily moving all of that metal.
Right.
You'll use your graver to bevel it, and you just move enough of that metal to hold the stone in place.
Once you hit the stone, quit.
Right. Exactly. And that I think that's one of the tricks that people it and it's
That
kind of
keeps it
hard to
from
explain.
being that keeps it from being wavy.
All you're trying to do is hold that stone
Yeah.
permanently so it doesn't go anywhere. And that big heavy bezel looks fantastic, but you're not going to try to move a 2 millimeter bezel the entire thing because there's too much risk of damaging the stone.
Yeah.
So you use an engraver. I use a flat engraver oftentimes to bevel that, and then I just move enough of it so that it holds the stone. So it gives you the optical illusion that you have this huge bezel holding it,
Right.
but in reality it's just millimeters, not even a millimeter, half a millimeter maybe. And then from YouTube, wow, you guys are fantastic. Nope, we're going to back up. We're going to go to Instagram, to Belinda Johns 18. Can you tell us about some of your experiences with 940? This is specifically for you, Rhonda.
Okay.
Can you tell us specifically about your experiences with 940 in contrast with 935?
Absolutely, I can. Um, there's so little difference, most people won't notice that you can combine the two. One is 940. It's not that much more fine silver in it, but proportionally with the germanium. So it is slightly whiter, but it's so slight. Will you see it? I don't know that you'll see it.
Right.
So again, there's no problem with combining the two at all.
Okay.
I actually, every year when I would go to London, I would get an opportunity to play in the studio with Peter Johns that invented it. And they were trying to make it a little better, which would be like, okay, at high temperatures, will it slump? No, it should not.
Right.
All of these things that maybe when they started with 930, when I first started with it. So, it's so molecular, it's so tiny, any changes that can actually change how the alloys react. And so I think that they will not see the difference. It will be slightly whiter.
Okay.
But I had a lot of 935 wire. Well, I'm still using that. And do I notice the difference? No.
And you can use the 935 with the 940.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm doing. I'm using 940 sheet, and often I'm doing the 935.
Right. So
I
my
mean the 9.
understanding was the
Yeah.
940 was a quality improvement.
It is. That's why I'm saying it is to make it ever so slightly whiter. All these things that make it so beautiful.
Right.
And that's what it's all about. Is it just like, I explained to a customer, it's almost like high carat gold. It's a it's higher silver. It's finer.
Correct.
And so, but I would teach him fine silver. Fine silver is not practical. And the fact you can harden this metal is amazing.
Right. That's something that a lot of people don't understand,
Oh
which is
my,
a huge difference between sterling and argentium, is you can harden it and get a much harder finished product.
up to 25% harder.
Right.
It can be made harder than you can. It's like you hammer your silver, it's going to get hard. You can make argentium that hard by putting it in the kiln.
Right.
So you can do lighter weight and more delicate pieces and have them strong.
So a heat hardening process rather
You
than
can
a
do it
work
in an
hardening.
oven, but a
Okay.
kiln, the optimum is 300 Celsius or 572.
Okay.
But you can do it in your oven at home. Lower temperature takes a longer time.
Right.
Okay.
But it's still going to give you that maximum hardness.
Yes, it's amazing. When I first did my videos, I sent it to Peter and he was just all excited. And then he goes, "Oh, you didn't mention hardening." I said, "It's already harder than anything I've ever used.
Right.
I'm used to 22 karat and fine silver.
Right.
Here, this is like sterling." And then I tried the hardening and oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like a 22 gauge, 0.65 millimeter disc that I made these earrings. And I was doing them for an auction for Florida Society of Goldsmiths. Anyway, I decided I wanted to curve them just a little bit. Couldn't do it, hitting it with the hammer over the edge of. I had to anneal it, but they were rubies, so I
Yeah.
could anneal it to move it, and then it moved very easily because now it's soft. And then you
Right.
stick it back in to harden it. Whoa, blew
That's
me away.
that's that's something that I think people who don't know anything about argentium need to understand is it has these different things, the brightness of color, the ability to harden it, the ability to fuse it, you
And
know.
no fire scale.
And
That's the
that
hugest.
that was going to be my closing. We're not selling argentium. We're not trying to sell you on argentium, but
Well, no,
but if you're getting started, I think that argentium is a great way to go because I know some other jewelers that use argentium exclusively, and I always find their marketing interesting
oh,
because they're able to use things like, better than sterling, finer than sterling, and they're not inaccurate statements.
it's also responsible silver. It is certified to be made
Right.
from recycled silver.
Yes.
That when I first started with it, I asked the CEO, "What would it take to use recycled silver?" He said, "I don't know. I'll get back with you." And he said, "It would take us 3 days." I said, "You're a fool if you don't do it because you're leading the industry anyway.
Right.
And this is important. This is important for our industry and
It's
for the
important for
world."
humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's wonderful. Yes, it is certified to be responsible silver. And I do think that was important.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's go to another question
Okay.
from Instagram. Kelly at Reichel Designs wants to know, can you enamel argentium?
Yes, I'm not an enamelist, but I would create. Yeah, I've got a number of things. I taught a
Yeah.
class in how to do it because it's so simple. And what I found, because I'm not an enamelist, I didn't know the rules that you're not supposed to be able to put pinks or reds or purples directly onto silver. Well, I don't know that rule, so I broke it to begin with.
Right.
And I went all the spectrum. I bought all these different colors. They did fine. And then I had Bill Poirier do some guilloche pieces for me, one fine silver and one argentium. And I did it with the beautiful lavender with purple around the edge. I did the argentium one first. And I thought, the silver's going to be prettier. It was bright yellow. What? What? And I went on Facebook. What happened? The enamelist said, "Oh, you can't put colors like that directly on silver." And I'm like, So interesting. It must mean the germanium comes up and protects the silver. Whatever is making it react to the silver did not react. But again, I am not an enamelist.
So just so I understand this correctly, so the fine silver, the enamel discolored,
Oh, big time.
but on the Argentium, the color was true.
It was as though what they do on the fine silver, I learned, is you put some kind of clear down first
Yep,
before you
yep.
put the color. Again,
Yeah,
I
but
was
you're
just
you're putting the
playing.
color directly onto the
Yeah.
Argentium.
And so I would
Yeah.
buy the pre-made jump rings from Rio and I'd have them fuse like 10 strips down and now here's 10 colors and pack them. You pack them all. Now you know how to solder and now you know how to make something.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
Right.
And
And
so,
it's color. People love color.
oh, absolutely. My first studio class in college was enameling, actually. But everybody's making jewelry, and I wasn't interested in jewelry, and I did both.
Right.
Yeah. So, it's the color, and I think that's what I loved about the stained glass is the purity of the colors you get.
Yeah, my daughter's a painter, and I taught her how to do enamel, and she
Oh,
won first at Santa Fe Indian Market last year with the enamel work that she had done, and it kind of blew my mind because she took to it right away. Because I think for one, she liked working with a lot of heat and seeing that.
I can
But
understand
but the
that.
thing
Yeah.
is the color for her, because it's like painting in glass
Oh,
and
well, and
everything.
what's surprising, you don't know what you're going to necessarily get. It looks white to me, and it comes
Right.
out bright red,
So
and just,
so
yeah,
to
there's an art to knowing your colors
so
there. But
to
yes, you can.
to
But
answer Kelly
again,
directly, yeah.
I never packed them very deep. I was using my fuse down wires as the cells, and I was doing it that way.
So I've got a YouTube uh, follower who Mary Ann Kachi, and I apologize for anybody's names that I don't get right. And she would like to know, I would be interested in the Flux and the mud products and how Rhonda developed them and why.
Okay. Well, let's start with the flux because with the
Hmm.
traditional formula from with the glue and the flux, it was always mighty flux.
Right.
And when you're putting granules down, they bubble up and move. That wasn't a good thing. So I
Right.
used to have my students dilute it.
Okay.
And then I worked with Rio
Hmm.
on
A
coming
new
up,
formula.
and then I wanted purple. I thought, well, if we're
Yeah.
doing this and we're making it special for Argentium, I just wanted a
Right.
purple.
That's cool.
Anyway, I even gave my phone, this is the color purple I want. And the biggest thing is it does not bubble up and move things as
Hmm.
much. It dries differently too because the Mighty Flux is stickier and hard, takes longer to dry. This dries much more quickly, and I tend to be a little impatient
Hmm.
sometimes. And so it's better for what I need, but you can use it on other metals.
Right. That's what I was going to say is
Yeah,
you can
gold,
you can
silver.
use it
It's
anywhere else you
it's
would use the other liquid fluxes like Mighty Flux, for
we
example.
just kept whatever makes that bubble up. We
Yeah.
just put a different thing in
Yeah.
place, and so that's the reason I like it the best. Is it doesn't move things around
So
for
it,
what I do,
so if
and it's sticky enough to hold things
sticky enough to hold things, dries quicker, doesn't bubble up and move around,
and protects.
and it protects your
Yeah,
pieces.
it's a lighter, when I'm going to the granulation stage, the Mighty Flux breaks down into what would be like little water droplets on the
Hmm.
surface. This is a much finer, even. And that, as far as fluxes for Argentium, paste flux does not do well because it's heavy and it
Yeah.
can leave little things.
Residual. It
Yeah,
it has
well,
a
especially going to the granulation stage
yeah,
because the surface becomes somewhat liquidous.
right. So when you were doing all that development, how long ago did you develop the purple flux?
Well, it took about 3 years in the
Right?
testing with every time I'd go travel and teach, I'd take samples and like, what do you think of this one? What do you think
Yeah.
this one? And probably for 3 years before they even came out with it.
I
So
think that's
it's
something a
been a
lot of
while.
people need to appreciate. You dedicated years of your life just to the
Well, it was
development of
my
the
needs.
purple
I'm
flux.
selfish.
Yeah?
This was because I wanted to,
Right.
yeah, it was fixing the one thing
You were
wrong
solving a problem.
for me and for
Right.
anyone that was granulating. Segue into the masking mud,
Hmm.
I came up with because of with soldering and how the solder can flow, and if you need to protect it, or even with granulating, you want to protect something where
It's not getting
it
reheated.
cannot, well, I mean, it's, I call it mud because it's like dirt. It actually, the solder cannot flow or you cannot fuse.
Hmm.
So in putting a ring together, I can put that mud right in the middle and, or wherever I want the mud, where I don't want it to fuse, and it'll protect it from that.
Gives you control.
Oh, but it, like, especially like when I was putting the cap onto the chain
Uh-huh.
here, you don't want that solder to flow up into the
Right.
chain. And so this will protect it, and it's easy to get off.
Okay, so how do you get it off? What's the easiest way?
Okay, the thing is to dry your flux before you put it on, because that actually creates a barrier. If your flux is wet, when you put it on, it mixes with the flux, and actually capillary action can pull it into your seam. You don't want that.
Right.
So I dry my flux. I dry it with the torch quick. Then I put it on there.
Okay.
And then when it's open water, I'll get it off.
All right.
I used to use it white out, way back when, and the
Yeah.
things you used to have. This is what it does for me, is when I want to protect it from other
And
things.
it doesn't have the chemical off-gassing that
No,
whiteout does or
not
anything
at
like that.
all. And that's, yeah.
That's good for people to know. So we can say it's safer than whiteout because
Oh,
I still see
absolutely.
people on Facebook and everything telling people, yeah, you can use whiteout or glue or different things.
You're adding dirt,
Well, but the thing that they
basically.
don't take into consideration is all of those things have consequences that they weren't designed for that purpose.
Right.
Whiteout was designed to white things out on paper. It wasn't designed to mask your jewelry
And
and
it
then
was
be
hard to
burnt
get
off.
off. I
Right.
used to have, oh, it was just like, especially with the granulation.
Uh-huh.
And then you would use yellow ochre. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Impossible to get
I
off.
still have that. I
Oh,
still
it's
I
horrible. And I
know.
would get it everywhere.
I know.
It's just horrible. But this replaced the yellow ochre for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Yeah,
easy to
I'm
get
that old.
off.
That's how I started too.
Oh,
And young people today, because they have Rhonda's masking mud, they don't know what yellow ochre is. And so
well.
they don't have to fight that dragon.
Well, and I even find the new students that have never really done jewelry kind of miss the wow factor with Argentium,
Yeah.
because they assume all metal will do this, and oh
Right.
no, oh no.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why I say people that are getting started and are new to it, Argentium is a great metal. If you can learn that, there's a lot of advantages to it. But I've got another
Good.
question from Instagram from Steve Lawrence, and he wants to know, and you're wearing a ring that's a perfect example of this. Can you cast Argentium, and does it come in casting grain?
It does. Yeah, I
So
had this ring
we'll
done on CAD
we'll make
actually.
sure we get pictures of this up because this ring
Okay.
is amazing.
Well, and this is when you know the limitations are taken away. What can I do? Yes, I could
Hmm.
do this in 18 karat gold, but yeah, how much? It took 8 feet of wire to make these granules.
To fuse.
No, to make every granule.
No, no,
It
but
took,
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying. You
yeah,
fuse the granules on there,
yeah, but
and
it
it's
took
18 feet, 8
eight
feet.
feet of wire cut into little tiny pieces first
Wow.
before you even glue them on. And so that, yes, they can, you're not limited because this is a thick, heavy ring.
So tell us the story of the ring. How did it come to be?
Well, I knew I got Scott Patrick that
Hmm.
works here at Rio to do the CAD for me, and I designed. I said I want 3 millimeters here, 0.5 millimeters here, the specifics of exactly what I
Right.
wanted, and so this was done on CAD, and then it's cast, and yes, they have
Casting grain.
casting grain.
Right.
I started actually teaching casting with Argentium in at Revere Academy.
Okay.
And yeah, we would even take all of our scrap, and there
And
was,
how does it compare to sterling?
you don't have to use borax.
Okay. You don't.
No,
Really?
no,
Okay.
because it doesn't get dirty.
And what else?
It comes out white. It's beautiful.
But
I
you
mean, what else? I don't know that, you know, you don't want to overheat any metal.
correct.
But I'm doing this is like small scale casting for the studio that I was teaching, not big industry. But that you want a clean crucible. You're gonna have it glazed, but you don't need to add boric acid. And when you're done, you let it sit a little bit longer. Like with the centrifuge,
Yeah.
I don't stop it. I go ahead and let it spin out.
Okay.
That would always be, impatient.
Right.
But I'd let it spin out, and then I set it aside. And when you don't want the sprue to be glowing, and it is basically, depends on the size of the flask, 5 minutes longer. Count to 10.
Right.
And then when you would then quench it, bubbling is okay. You don't want it boiling in there because there can be a thermal shock. So basically, you just wait a little bit longer, and the castings are so beautiful.
And
So,
and they're very, very white. That's
oh, you
that's
don't
what.
even, they come out white. Yeah, because it, that's
So
part of
the
the
so
beauty
the
and
there's
magic of
less
Argentium.
cleanup. There's less, of
It,
all that quote unquote work that you have
oh
to
my
do.
gosh, yeah. I mean, you
Yeah.
pickle both, but how do you keep from getting fire scale? Because, oh, I tried. I had a student in Spain, in Switzerland, that turned Argentium black, and I didn't know you could do that. Well, so I really worked at trying to do that. And what did they do to make it go? Because I'd
Yeah.
never seen it ever turn black. Well, they're heating it with such a soft flame that the copper, but there was no fire scale. I had them
So they
do
were
a,
pulling the copper to the surface.
yeah, and somehow they did it before it was like a really low temperature. Anyway, so I took it. There was no fire scale. I mean, I
Huh.
tried to make it do this. I really worked at it to try and see if I could
Right.
create fire scale. I tried burning it up. It's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, you can't. It doesn't.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, and that's one of the things I don't like about sterling.
That leads into this next question about Argentium from T. Kiplinger on Instagram. They want to know if you have any recommendations for resources on learning to work with Argentium. And they have a secondary question, which is a class required? So,
Well,
so who do you
all
recommend,
right. First
if
of all, I
anyone?
have a great set of videos
Right?
that Rio carries about Argentium because this is, and you can even see the evolution from where I first started to the videos.
Uh-huh.
I have about a dozen of them, I think.
Right?
And it's like taking a class with me, basically.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of video clips also on YouTube and on my website that I try to share. And okay, and there's classes around. If you have skills, I don't think it's, you just have to learn that it is different.
Right.
That
Well, this is how I approach it. If you've been making jewelry,
yeah,
it's different. But if you've never been making jewelry,
it's easy.
it's easy. Yes.
Absolutely, I
Yeah.
agree with that. That's why it's perfect, I think, for beginners, and the fact that you can use like a creme brulee torch to even do this.
Exactly.
One of these charcoal blocks and a creme brulee torch. And I love your spinners,
Yeah.
those little rotating charcoal holders. And I had a student in Austin that she goes, "Can I take this torch home and the charcoal block?" I said, "Sure." She goes, my next day she comes in like this, and she said, my husband kept going, "You coming to bed?" She goes, "Not anytime soon." And so the fact, she goes, "I can take this to the lake
Yep.
house, and and I don't have to take a lot of tools, a few little hand tools," which segue into my favorite hand tools are the Swanstrom pliers.
Yeah.
They're flush cutters, super flush, and those long, beautiful chain nose pliers.
Yeah.
I travel with them
That's
all over.
good.
Yeah, they're the
Yeah.
best.
So those are a must-have
Oh
tool.
yeah, those two pliers. I mean, they have a lot of good ones,
Right.
but those two in particular, they're irreplaceable.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I've got another question from Instagram from Hebel Designs, and they want to know, can you melt Argentium and roll Argentium?
Absolutely, yes, you
Yep.
can. And we were saying Chris Pruitt is a big example
Right.
of that. He pours these gorgeous
Yeah.
ingots. And, I've done it from scrap. I had a student in Austin, and she was 19, so she saved every bit of her metal and scrapped every bit of it, including the dust, because you can sprinkle the dust and it's beautiful. She was even sprinkling the dust on steel because you can, and fusing the Argentium dust onto steel. just steel you can get at the hardware store.
You know,
Sheet. It was cool.
I I can't remember who the artist is, but he does a lot of steel and he fuses gold to it.
That was Chris.
Have you,
Chris passed away a few
oh, is
years
that
ago.
who that
Yeah,
was? Did
yeah.
he do Argentium?
No, but I showed it to him and he went, like that's just too easy.
Yeah,
But absolutely you can, and then she would just melt it together and roll it back out and make another project.
really?
Yeah. And she was pushing limits that
Yeah,
I don't know that I would have gone.
right.
So that's again where I've learned so much. I learn from my
Well,
students all the time,
and that's why you're such a good instructor
I think.
because you listen as much as, if not more, than you profess.
Well, I want to learn too.
Well, I think that's what I think. I just finished another semester of teaching in Santa Fe, and people have been asking me, so how was it? I was like, well, it's better for me than it was for them.
Oh,
The students don't realize how much they feed you
oh,
because
exactly. And this is where
it's
I'm going off to Dallas next week to teach the gold on Argentium,
okay.
and oh, it's gonna be fun.
So do you
I
have
have a good time.
do you have a full schedule of
I'm
classes
cutting
coming up?
back.
You're
I'm cutting
cutting, yeah,
back. I've decided that I want to enjoy life. Well, not that I don't enjoy that, but I went to Thailand last year for
yeah,
6 weeks, and then I already, as soon as I got home, I booked it. I'm going back.
yeah.
But I'm working doing chasing and repoussé in this temple with these monks are the only other people in this temple, and it's just like wow.
And so for people who are watching us, what's the scale that you're, because I
Oh,
know I've seen what you've done.
well, it was like
Yeah, they're
it was.
huge. They're
Well,
not jewelry size.
I want
They're
to make a big one next year.
yeah.
I've already decided what I want to do, but how do I get it back on the plane? But it is combining like what I learned from
Yeah.
Fabrizio as far as the way he moves metal compared to the way they move metal. And I'm like, so I took some of
Yeah.
my Fabrizio tools with me, and yeah, I just wanted to go have
Yeah.
fun with art. Uh,
Well,
yeah.
that's the
So
best
I'm
way to
cutting
live.
back on teaching so much, and I, yeah, I'm enjoying staying home. I have maybe only twice a year where I have 5 benches in my studio where people can come. But when they do come, instead of having it a structured workshop, I'm finding what works best is the independent studies. What do you need?
Hmm.
What do you need? And what do you
Yeah.
need? Because they're almost all a prior student or at least have skills and they have questions.
Right.
You're going to have different questions than them. So with only 5 students, it makes it very doable. And I like doing that.
Yeah. It's so if people are interested in your classes, how do they find out about them? What's the
Well,
best way?
I should have them on my website,
Okay.
but I
And what
usually will post it on Facebook. There is it's Argentium Silver Artists Forum
on
on
Facebook?
Facebook. Argentium
Argentium
Silver Artists Forum,
on Facebook.
and it's a place for questions about it, a place to
Okay.
post your pictures, a place for anyone that's teaching to post where they're having workshops.
Right. And then your website. What's your website?
RondaCoryell.com.
Imagine that, rondacoryell.com. Okay, I've got some questions here that aren't necessarily Argentium
Okay.
questions, but I'll take your assistance on any of them if you have any insights. From YouTube, I've got Deb Machin or Mackin. Off the subject, but is there a way for me to stabilize at home raw turquoise? That's a yes and a no.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know about that.
if you have a way to, the way I understand it, in order to stabilize turquoise, it's got to be in a vacuum.
That would
So
be my thoughts.
if you have a way to put it in a vacuum, then maybe you can do
Because
it.
that sucks out the air bubbles
Right.
within the stone, and the liquid can
Yeah,
go
and then
in
the
to
polymer resin can be
stabilize.
introduced. So, Marianne, I hope that answers your question. And then I have another question here from YouTube. This is Fim Makeen Designs. And they say, I purchased a Graversmith a while ago and was wondering what class would you suggest to learn how to sharpen the tools and learn the basics. I want to use it for stone setting. Okay, I'm going to recommend to this person the same thing I recommend to most everyone else. GRS in Kansas,
Oh, absolutely.
especially if they have a Graversmith. Go on their website. They have classes from everything from basics to highly advanced. They have some of the best engraving instructors in the world come through there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And GRS is the place to go.
It's in Kansas.
It's in
Yeah.
Kansas, yeah. And let me see what else we have. And then again from YouTube, Joyce Berner. The gravers are exactly my issue. I've watched many videos and still haven't gotten a really sharp graver. I have the graver for my hammer handpiece, and I'm working on a belt buckle in brass.
I bought that Graver power hone
Yeah.
thing, worth every penny,
Oh yeah, yeah.
because I thought I was bad at engraving. I realized I was just bad at sharpening them, and that oh, it's worth every penny. It's where you
And
can set up your gravers, and it will. You set up your
right.
angle. It is. And it
The
has
the
all the
GRS
different
Power Home.
wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of people don't know this, but that GRS Power Home, it's not just for gravers.
Oh,
I use it to make tools, like to shape things and
yeah.
everything. So
Yeah.
Joyce, the GRS Power Home is probably the way to go. We have a bunch of different attachments that you can use to help you get the right angles and everything. But I want to remind everybody, May is Frederick Dick File Month. So to get 10% off all of your Frederick Dick files, use the promo code FILES10. That's FILES10 for 10% off Frederick Dick files. We're coming to the end here. So this is your last chance to get questions in for Rhonda about Argentium. Before we do that, I want to remind everybody, you can rewatch this live broadcast on YouTube. It's also on Facebook, and you can listen to it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Listen to it for the Love of Jewelers podcast from Rio Grande, anywhere you listen to podcasts. But before we finish, Rhonda, got a couple of questions that I like to ask people. One, what is your favorite tool?
Those Swanstrom chain nose pliers. There's two of them. I
Okay,
need both
okay,
of them.
okay.
And the super flush, and they're so fine, but they're like flat. They're not tilted out, so you have to. They're,
Okay.
they were designed for exactly what I need, and you could go in and you can cut even the tip of a prong with
Really?
those. Those are so accurate. Yeah, those I have to travel with those,
Fantastic.
and those that chain nose, and it's so fine on the end that I can get in to do swirl, all kinds of things that larger pliers won't do.
So the
So
Swanstrom pliers and the Swanstrom
Swanstrom,
flush cutters.
yeah,
Okay.
chain nose plier, but it's extra long, skinny chain
Okay.
nose.
And then my last question for you is going to be, because you've been doing this for quite some time and you've had a lot of students come through your door, but if you had to advise your 12-year-old self about anything, it doesn't even have to be jewelry, what advice would you give them?
Don't be afraid to dream big.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so.
Shoot for the stars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. Well, Rhonda, I look forward to getting together and doing this again. You're still one of my favorite
Well,
people. You
thank
have a
you so
beautiful
much.
smile and your energy is amazing. I hope people get some of that through this and they realize this. For anybody who's interested in Argentium, they can go to your website and see
Yes,
what
that
class
and
schedules
this
you have up.
Argentium Silver Artist Forum is a place. There are no stupid questions.
Okay.
It's just there's a lot of people that go on there. Even Peter Johns himself will
Yeah.
occasionally make comments on
And
things,
I
and it's a
think
place for questions or just to display what you're working on.
I think that's important for people to understand, especially about the people that work in Argentium. The community is very helpful.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
Argentium community, in my
Yes. The
observation, is
sharing
very
of
helpful. Yeah,
information. And the sharing of information is so important with this because,
right.
yes, it is different. It's its own metal. So, this information, I think, is, especially from the beginning, and that's why I got so involved with it. I thought, you must understand this metal. You must understand this.
Yeah.
So it is a community where we're all willing to answer questions. And sometimes with a student, I'll say, well, I don't know, let's try this and it'll work or not.
That's
And it's not being afraid of making mistakes.
well, there's no mistakes if you're learning.
No, that's where the learning happens.
Right.
Now, that's
Yeah.
the best learning is when
Yeah.
something happens. If everything goes perfectly, it's not the same learning is when you leave, you have learned, oh, I don't ever do that, or I must do this. These things of when things happen is where the true learning is happening.
Right. In the recovery.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing with Argentium, since you've not added solder, you just melt it down, roll it out, and do it again.
Yeah. Well, with that, we're gonna call it. And thank you everybody for sharing your Tuesday with us. And we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Remember, Files 10 for 10% off. Frederick Dick Files till the end of May. Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you.